Hello there, and welcome to this video on the Daystate Blackwolf. In this video I'm going to be going over the trigger adjustment process for the rifle, as well as going over some troubleshooting tips. Now before we get started with the adjustments, there are a few things that I would like to make you aware of. Firstly, before any work is done to the trigger, we need to make sure the rifle is safe to work on. The way we do that is by cocking the rifle, removing the single shot loader or magazine if one is fitted. What we can do then is dry fire the rifle into a nice safe backstop. This ensures that there's not a pellet loaded into the barrel and that the rifle is safe to work on. The next thing I'll mention is that this particular rifle here has been fully degassed, and this has been done just to make filming this video a little easier. When adjusting your trigger, there is no need to degas the rifle. Similarly, you can see that the action has been removed from the stock and the trigger guard has been removed from the trigger. This again has been done to make the filming of this video slightly easier, and you can always adjust your trigger through the trigger guard via the slots in the bottom here. With that said, all of the trigger adjustments can be adjusted using a 1.5mm Allen key. With that said, the last thing I'll do is show you how to decock the rifle. So with the rifle on fire, what we're going to do is bring the cocking arm all the way back until we hear it click into position. What we're going to do then is lightly hold the cocking arm in place and depress the trigger. As you pull the trigger, the cocking arm is going to want to fall forward, so just make sure you've got a nice firm grip of it, again as the cocking arm will want to move forward. With that all said and done, we can get on to the adjustments. So the first thing I'll do is just run through what each of these screws does and what happens when we adjust them. Starting off at the back, this one here is our safety adjustment. This one is just a set point adjustment, so if it's too far in, the safety catch, this part here, won't be able to rotate fully, and if it's too far out, the rifle will fire whilst it's on safe. The next adjustment, this one here, is our first stage weight adjustment. Winding this grub screw in will increase first stage weight, and winding it out will decrease first stage weight. Our next adjustment, this one here, is the first stage travel. If we adjust this grub screw in, this will decrease first stage travel, and if we wind it out, this will increase first stage travel. At this point I want to mention that if this grub screw is wound too far in, the rifle won't cock. The next adjustment, this one here, is the over travel on the trigger after the rifle has been fired. From the factory this is set and it typically doesn't need to be adjusted by the end user. However, winding this screw in will decrease the amount of over travel on the trigger, and winding it out will increase the amount of over travel. And again, I will mention that if this grub screw is wound too far in, the rifle may not cock. Our last adjustment on the trigger plate, this one here, controls the second stage travel. Winding this in gives us less second stage travel, and winding it out gives us more. At this point, I will also mention that if this adjustment is wound too far in, the rifle may not cock. Our last two adjustments relate to the trigger itself, so we have the trigger post and the trigger blade adjustments. If we take a look at the side of the trigger blade, we can see this screw here. If we were to loosen this, we could slide the trigger post up and down this small rail here. We also have a screw in the side of the trigger blade, just on that side there, which if loosened, we could move the trigger up and down and also rotate it left or right to better suit your finger position. Typically speaking, when you're adjusting your trigger, you're going to be concentrating on second stage travel, first stage travel, as well as trigger weight. If you wanted to get your trigger a little lighter, you could loosen this screw slightly and then retest. If you wanted a little less first stage travel, you could wind this screw in slightly and then retest the trigger to see if it's to your liking. And if you found that your trigger had a little bit of second stage creep, you would need to adjust this screw here. If your trigger had a little bit of creep, you would need to wind this screw in slightly and then recheck the trigger. At this stage, I do want to mention that when adjusting the trigger, it should be done incrementally. So between an eighth and a quarter of a turn at the time on each of the adjustments, and they should be adjusted one at a time rather than a whole bunch at once. This just makes it a lot easier to retrace your steps, just in case you make an adjustment that you're not happy with. The final thing I'll do is just show you a full trigger reset. Right then, so what I've gone ahead and done is very poorly adjusted the trigger. As you can see there, the trigger blade is locked into position. We can't rotate the safety, and also the rifle doesn't cock. So we have a good amount of problems there, but we're going to be solving them nice and easily. The first thing we're going to be doing is taking our 1.5mm Allen key and just winding each of the grub screws out until they're flush with their respective surfaces. The only grub screw we're not going to be touching at the moment is the first stage travel. So I'm going to start off with the second stage travel. And then just moving through each of the grub screws. So I'll get you a quick look at that so you can see our current position. All grub screws are flush with their respective surfaces, and at the moment our trigger blade should move. We should be able to rotate the safety bar, and if we bring the cocking arm back, the rifle may or may not cock. Now this cocking is dependent on the first stage travel grub screw, and as I said earlier, at the moment the adjustment is wound too far in, stopping the rifle from cocking. That's nice and easy to fix though. We can take our Allen key, put that through the hole, and then just wind it out a couple of turns at a time. And then rechecking the cocking arm after we've made our adjustment. And as you can see there, after a couple of turns, our rifle cocks and we can pull the trigger. At this point, the trigger should be working, however, it doesn't feel very nice. So what we're going to do now is go through each of the adjustments and get them exactly where we want them. We're going to be starting off with the second stage travel, and this trigger at the moment doesn't have a defined second stage. So what we're going to be doing is winding this screw in about half a turn at a time until we get the adjustment we want. So at that point there is a second stage to the rifle. However, there is quite a bit of creep there. So at this point I'm going to do quarter adjustments at a time. And if you go too far past the adjustment, the rifle won't cock, but that's nice and easy to sort out. We can just back it off eighth of a turn at a time. And there we have it. The rifle is now cocking, and the second stage is nice and short without any creep. So I'm quite happy there. Now on my triggers, I like a nice short first stage with a nice crisp second stage. So the next thing we'll do is adjust the first stage travel. So if we cock the rifle, you can see that there's quite a lot of first stage travel there, and we want to get rid of that. We're going to be adjusting this grub screw in half a turn at a time and removing the Allen key after each adjustment. With that done, that's pretty much how I like my triggers. If we cock the rifle, we have a nice short first stage and a nice crisp second stage, so I'm quite happy there. If we wanted to, we could also adjust the after travel of the trigger. With the grub screw flush, that feels quite good to me. However, again, you can adjust this to your liking. The further in you wind this grub screw, the less over travel that you'll have. The further out, the more over travel you'll have. The final two adjustments, the two at the back, are the trigger weight or the first stage weight and the safety adjustment. So what I'm going to do is slightly wind the trigger weight in. and that's purely a personal preference type adjustment. You can adjust this how you would prefer. And again, winding this grub screw in increases weight, winding it out decreases weight. The last adjustment is the safety adjustment. So as you can see here, the safety bar rotates exactly as it should, so it's not too far in. And if we put the rifle on safe, cock the rifle, try and pull the trigger, you can see that the rifle doesn't fire when on safe. If you couldn't rotate the safety bar freely, that would indicate that this grub screw here is wound too far in, and if the rifle fired when the rifle was on safe, it would indicate that this grub screw here was wound too far out. You can also use this grub screw here to adjust the amount of travel that the trigger has when the rifle is on safe, so I'm going to take a little bit of that out. And as you can see there, the trigger has very little movement whilst the rifle is on safe, but the safety bar rotates nice and freely. Right then, and there we have a full trigger adjustment guide for the Daystate Blackwolf. What I've gone ahead and done is spent a little bit of time with the trigger, adjusted it exactly as I like it. And what we're going to be doing now is just putting the trigger weight gauge on it. Now I do want to mention that this is a 100% factory trigger. I haven't polished it, I haven't changed any of the springs, it's exactly as it came out of the factory. However, it has been readjusted. If we take a look at the back of the rifle, you can see that the power wheel is on max setting, so we should be good to go. To start off with, we'll cock the rifle. I'll just set the gauge. Then we can pull the trigger. So as you can see there, a 6-ounce trigger, and that's about 170 grams. We'll do another one just to make sure that wasn't a fluke. .3 ounces or 180 grams. So a really nice little trigger there on the Daystate Blackwolf, and one of my favourite features of the rifle. And with that all said and done, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting or useful, and we'll see you in the next one.